We've made it an entire week and not a single bank has collapsed, which is great news for the entire economy, the Kansas City housing market. But in this video, we're breaking down three stories that will certainly impact us here in Kansas City. Number one, institutional investors. It seems like they've left and they've stopped buying up all of those homes, but are they gone for good? Number two, we're breaking down the mortgage fee debacle, which has people with good credit scores who have saved up enough money to put a large down payment on a home, paying more than they did just a month ago. And then finally, at the end of this video, we'll break down exactly why the Kansas City real estate market shortage seems to be getting worse and why we might just be turning a corner. Same institutional investors that bought hundreds, thousands of homes, sometimes even entire neighborhoods in specific cities across the country, will they have fled the market faster than they flooded it just a couple years ago? Here's a graph from Fortune.com that breaks down Invitation Homes, which is one of the largest institutional investors that was buying properties across the country. You can see right when mortgage rates really hit their peak, around the time that we heard that very loud, impossible to ignore drumbeat of a housing market crash, that's when they substantially started to decrease their home buying activities. In fact, they've hit the pause button entirely, and it's not just them, but several institutional investors across the country have entirely ceased their home buying operations. So what in the world do these investors know that you and I don't? Well, there are a couple of things that apply to them that don't quite apply to us and give us an upper hand when it comes to competing against them. So these are the two reasons that they're currently sidelined, and also the reasons that they might just be wading back into the housing market at the end of the year. Number one is mortgage rates. Investors don't do the typical primary residence loan that many people that are buying homes do. In fact, these are commercial loans which come at more expensive interest rates, and oftentimes they're floating. And right now, those interest rates are between 7 and 8%, depending on the size of the loan and the value of the property. They could be upwards of 10%, which gives you and I a huge advantage, especially if we're getting a loan for our primary residence. But it won't last forever, because number two is that these institutions expect prices to drop across the country another 12 to 15%, which, yes, I agree, totally seems super outlandish, like it couldn't happen. And maybe it would make more sense if we're just talking about the West Coast, which is flooded with inventory and has people leaving quicker than we ever thought possible. But that's not quite the whole picture. A lot of these institutions need both of those things to happen, both rates to come down, which we probably won't see until later this year. They also need home prices to come down, which we know is kind of a teeter-totter effect. I'll link my video from last week where we described this specifically. When home prices go up, mortgage rates usually go down because people just can't afford those prices, and it's the only way to incentivize people to get loans, which keeps the mortgage industry humming along. And when mortgage rates go up, home prices go down because nobody wants to pay a higher monthly payment. So it's very unlikely that we see both of these things happen, especially in the Kansas City housing market, which means now's the window of opportunity. You've got a little breathing room before all of these institutional investors feel safe wading back into the housing market, where you have to compete head to head with them and their big cash offers with their very big pockets. If we do see mortgage rates decline, which is probably the factor that matters more to these institutions, we'll most likely see home prices start to shoot up, which will keep a lot of these investors just completely sidelined for the time being. Part number two is this mortgage fee debacle. Not only is this super frustrating if you spent years making sure your credit score is in tip-top shape and saving up money for a sizable down payment on a home, but it's also one of the most harebrained ideas and least effective ways of actually making housing more affordable. Long story short, there's a big gap in the amount of fees charged in order to get a loan or a mortgage. People with good credit scores making sizable down payments are going to be paying less in fees than people with low credit scores making low down payments. This change, effectually what it did is it took this gap and it decreased it a little bit. So in other words, the incentive you have to spend years making sure your credit score is in tip-top shape, saving up for that high down payment of 20% on a home, your incentive to do those things has decreased. Now you're going to be paying more in fees, and while you're not paying more than the people with low credit scores who are making a low down payment, you're definitely not getting the same discount that you would just a month ago before all of these changes happened. And while it doesn't make sense to intentionally hurt your credit score or make a lower down payment because you're still maxing out the advantage that you can get and you're still reducing the fees as much as possible by doing those things, it is certainly frustrating. The government already has an entire administration, an entire loan category devoted to helping these people with low credit scores who can't quite make a sizable down payment of 5, 10, 20%. They're called FHA loans, and oftentimes they come with more favorable terms than conventional loans from the get-go, and they only require 3.5% down. So it's very confusing to me why this was even implemented in the first place, and it certainly doesn't address the housing affordability problem problem. Here are 3 things that we could do that would matter exponentially more and probably address the root cause of the housing affordability crisis. Number 1 is mortgage rates. Here's a picture from Fortune.com. It shows that mortgage rates are the principal reason, they're the biggest factor contributing to the housing affordability crisis right now. And while the Federal Reserve is continuing to increase interest rates and might be headed for a pause, it's one thing that we could do that it seems like we're headed towards at the end of the year that could really make a difference. Number 2 is this supply-demand gap. There's a huge supply shortage, not just in Kansas City, but across the entire country. And the one way to really make a meaningful difference is maybe incentivize more home building so that there's more supply in the market and prices naturally decrease because of that, because home buyers now have more options to choose from and they can actually take their time doing it. The third thing that we can do, I think this is a total no-brainer that probably anybody would agree with, is we should make all of this financial education stuff way more accessible and spend our money on that instead of trying to do some wealth redistribution stuff that's so minuscule it doesn't make a sizable impact to those people who have low credit scores, making low down payments. And at the very least, we should at least spend some money in public schools, making sure that kids learn this so when they grow up and they do have that dream to buy their first home, that this is not something that they have to worry about and that they don't have to rely on a fee restructuring in order to buy their first home. Part number 3 is the housing shortage in Kansas City that we have documented extensively on this channel. And while it seems to be getting worse, it might just be turning the corner. Here's a graph from Fortune.com that shows that as of April 2023, we are near the lows in 2020 in terms of new home listings. In other words, new homes coming onto the market, which means as school is about to get out in just a couple of weeks and all of those home buyers who are waiting to sell their home and enter the housing market so that it's not disrupting the school year, as soon as they wade into the market, there's not enough inventory to match that demand. And that's why even right now we're seeing bidding wars. I've got several people looking for homes and actively shopping. And as soon as these homes go on the market, they're getting an offer hours later. There's an offer deadline set, which means you got to bring your best and highest offer. And oftentimes that means you're going over asking price, conceding everything possible, possibly even waiving the inspection. It's just not a good situation, but there is light at the end of the tunnel. Here's another graph from that same Fortune.com article that shows in Kansas City, active housing inventory is actually a little bit higher than it was just the past couple summers. And while it's still below the summer of 2020, it seems like we're still on that path to those pre-COVID inventory levels. In other words, not having to deal with bidding wars, not having to deal with putting an offer in hours after seeing a property. Now, if you can afford to wait just a month or 2 months, you can see on this graph that every single year, the housing inventory basically increases after that dark red mark, which is where we're at right now. Then you will have not only more choices, you'll have a little bit more time to shop around, albeit not very much, and the potential for you getting a good deal on one of these homes, even in today's Kansas City real estate market, is going to increase dramatically. Now, while the fate of the Kansas City real estate market, the economy, and everything else kind of hinges on whether the Federal Reserve decides to increase interest rates next month, pause, or even possibly decrease rates later this year, there are 2 reasons why right now is a good window of opportunity to buy your home in the Kansas City real estate market. Number 1 is that we know, at least right now, the institutional investors with really deep pockets, not, the mom and pop investors, the really big sharks, they are sidelined for now. At some point, they will wade back into the waters. We just don't know when. Just right now is a clear window of opportunity where you won't have to compete with them. Number 2 is that even though it feels really competitive and like there are less listings to choose from, it seems like around the corner in just a couple months and even the fall, inventory should start to increase. And we're in fact in a better place than we were the last 2 summers. And it looks like in this post-COVID world that we're really heading to those pre-pandemic levels of inventory, which means a balanced market where you can take your time and really shop around and do as much as you can to get a good deal while still doing your inspection, still doing the appraisal without having to make an offer the minutes after you saw a home. So it seems like there's a lot of light at the end of the tunnel, but as always, there are a lot of wild cards floating around in the air. And if you'd like to talk about any of this and prepare a strategy to take advantage of exactly what's happening right now in the Kansas City real estate market, I would love to work with you. All of my contact info is below. We can set up a time to talk, have that conversation, so you've got a clear roadmap to victory and really getting a good deal when selling or buying your home in this turbulent housing market. If you enjoyed the video, hit that like button for me, subscribe so you see weekly updates and you're updated as soon as things change, and I will see you on the next video.